every one of you so much for being here. There's no way any of us are going to be able to separate our memories of Jack from our memories of his music. He was more than a musician, of course. He was a son, a brother, a friend, an artist, and a thinker. But right now, his songs are in my head and in my heart. Since he was knee-high, Jack demonstrated his love of good music. His pitch was perfect, and his tone was clear, and his taste was his own. But being a kid, he was only really exposed to the music we had in the house, which at the time was basically musicals and NPR. He managed to pick things up with just one listen, which was both incredible and a little nerve-wracking. There was no way of knowing if what you were listening to, or saying for that matter, wouldn't come pouring out of his mouth the following day at dinner or on the playground. So really, it shouldn't have come as a surprise when he made a name for himself around age 7 in the outfield in Little League. He made his mark not as the amazing fielder or the terrific sportsman, but as the boy who would spend entire innings crouched near the ground, searching for four-leaf clovers, singing Handel's Hallelujah chorus at the top of his lungs. He belted the melodies with verve and was the delight of everyone watching the game. He contributed to the game in the way that truly was most appropriate for him. He didn't score points, but was still the player that everyone talked about. Or the time when Clara, Jack, Mom, Tim, and I went out to eat, and Jack, only a little older at this point, disappeared into the bathroom, and the entire restaurant was treated to a rousing rendition of Tomorrow from Annie, coming from the men's room. I remember the four of us sitting at the table and not daring to look at each other for fear of confirming what we all knew was true. Jack was perfectly recreating the sorrowful theme song of the plucky red-headed orphan in the most public of private settings. Had his enthusiasm been not quite so great and his talent not quite so large, the incident would have been little more than a kid being a kid, and no one would have given it a second thought. But his commitment to his musical endeavor at the time so greatly outweighed any sort of self-consciousness that the restaurant was filled with the strains of Jack's perfect pitch, muffled only by the thin wood of the men's room door. Since he was a toddler in his crib, Jack would treat us to his musical stylings at any hour of the day or night. One night, I can remember a particularly loud version of Joy to the World, when he sang himself completely hoarse while belting the tune to a set of misremembered lyrics, recasting the hymn as Oil to the Wheel. Even without formal training or the actual words, he threw himself into the musical task at hand, managed to impress and create a lasting memory. It's important to remember Jack's music. It was something he loved and devoted himself to. His voice was clear and true and full. He played many instruments, nearly all of them self-taught, and loved them for their variations and individual strengths, and he loved the ways he could blend his voice with each of their distinct sounds. He was committed to these instruments. I know because I can personally attest to the fact that he would loudly practice his banjo until 3 in the morning, but used each of them for different songs, calling on them at different times, and using them all to inform his larger library of songs, which is where we find his most sincere self-expression. The number of instruments was always growing, and he was always becoming more familiar with each one and loving it for the unique qualities it offered. It's clear to me that he collected friends who were as varied in qualities and vast in number as his beloved instruments. Each one of them was select and informed his personality in different ways that made him more interesting and interested. His music was the product of a lot of work and an uncommon dedication to a beloved thing. Jack's friends were much the same. I have never known anyone as unfailingly devoted to his friends as Jack was. I was lucky enough to watch Jack grow from an exceedingly precocious little boy who liked doing well in school and fighting with his sisters, truly the things he did best, to a young man who was complex in unexpected, challenging, and remarkable ways. It was as a young man that he found ways of capturing his particular view of the world, and I feel so lucky that we have photos and art and songs as artifacts of his life, which so clearly defied logic and convention. What an enigma Jack was. He was uncompromising in his dedication to his studies and to his friends. He was profoundly talented and generous with his talents, but somehow never a braggart. He was constantly trying to figure out just where he stood on things and was never one to back down from challenge and debate. I've never known anyone to remain as unflinchingly dedicated to his friends without so much as a single disparaging remark. I had never known it was possible to be a staunch individual in the middle of so many networks of genuinely loving groups. He was bullheaded in his personal ethos and biting and wry with his humor. Yet he was his friend's and his sister's fierce defender and managed to make most of us look good just by being near us. I have to say how sorry I am that I won't be able to know Jack as an adult. I was looking forward to hearing of his triumphs and being with him through his struggles. I wanted to watch movies with him for the rest of my life. I wanted to watch my parents continue to beam at his accomplishments and his sisters be his advocates as he continued to grow. He was so interesting, and I feel cheated in not getting to discover more about him as he discovered more about the world. It's hard to really cover all of the things I'm feeling right now. I actually spend about half the time in this strange fog where Jack's absence hasn't really settled. I just have this kind of pounding in my heart and a sick feeling in my stomach. The rest of the time, I am so upset. I am so upset because I feel cheated out of a lifelong relationship with my brother. I'm upset because all I can see is an incredibly broad community of people who wanted nothing more than to watch him continue to flourish. I see his friends who love him in a way that makes my heart sing and ache at the same time. I see myself and my sisters who love him as our only brother, who is our constant headache, our continual wonder, and the boy we couldn't wait to see become an amazing man. But most of all, I see my parents. My parents who love his talents, which are many, his intellect, which is great, and his individualism, which is unfailingly strong. Their love for him is absolutely unconditional in a way that absolutely astounds me. I will never be able to figure Jack out, but the things I do know and will always keep are his humor, the way he would quietly sing to himself when he was driving, how his eyes would kind of twinkle when he found something genuinely funny, how he remained staunchly true to his own code, how incredibly special Gwenny was to him, his love of gross food, and his sure place in a family made up of individuals. Jack will always be my brother, and I will always miss him.